Good evening, Shuffle Bus Nation. What is up? It's your boy Jesse. I don't have my chat doc for some reason now. Don't know where it went. Hey, what's up, Billy? Good to see you, man. I got it now. um, yeah, so welcome to another Shuffle Bus
Quality,
Live.
quality content as always.
Always, man. We only bring the best. That's the way it works. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, so we're going to first off, I got some feedback from last week that my levels were too quiet. Please let me know if I'm too quiet to kneel, because I'm happy to try to make adjustments on the fly here to improve the audio output. The other thing that I'm doing is playing around with some of the back end settings on this microphone because it's completely more robust than the Yeti I was using before. So understand that, like, I'm working on that. I do believe I have the mono channel figured out. Um, Manly.
Only here for the best, but I learn. Oh, he's gonna be disappointed.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I don't know, man. I brought some heat last week. I mean,
your
if you were here last week, you know I brought some heat last week. So you never
you,
know.
your new mic sounds awesome to me through Zoom. When you're close to it, it sounds a little gravelly, like when you're real close to it.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's super sensitive. So, like, if I'm back here, it's really
yeah,
quiet. But if I'm up here, then it potentially gets really loud. So, and if I turn
yeah,
and face it, it's like crazy. So, I'm trying to find the sweet spot where I can run the show and talk into this mic and make it work because it is
right. So
obviously,
that in like a week we can tear it down and drive it across the country and then bring it home.
basically, yes, that's true.
And then you have to find the sweet spot again.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'll have to redo it all, but it at least if I kind of have a working point, I know where I need to go from. And yeah, I don't know. So, Neil, we lost you last week at the end of the show, right? Like, you
Yeah,
had
I
internet die.
I
Uh,
didn't get internet back like for an hour and a half or something.
the joys of living in uh, Florida, right? Like, it just
Yeah, it's it's not the infrastructure here is weird because all the power lines and like utility lines are underground because if they were above ground whenever there was a hurricane, everything would be dead.
yeah, that's true.
So whenever there's like a storm, like a thunderstorm, if there's a lightning strike close by, it like temporarily knocks out power or internet or whatever in the area. And sometimes it's just for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's not. But it would be worse if there was a hurricane and then we like the power lines got knocked down during the hurricane. Uh
Well, for sure, because it'd take weeks to technically get you back up and running potentially. So
right. So
obviously
just
that's not good.
just something I deal with. I have the best internet that is available in my area, uh, which is unfortunate that it goes out sometimes. But
So,
it's storming now, and everything's up and running. So
we'll hope you'll hang on for tonight's show.
yeah,
The so I don't know if you caught the tail end of my monologue last week, but I went off, but I think in a constructive way. I hope so. I hope it was perceived as constructive. I I have you and I have a pretty deep understanding of the behind the scenes, like the behind the curtain of the Wizard of Oz, if you will, in the board game space, right? Like, we've seen that. We know what it works like. We've made
yeah,
mistakes.
to a certain extent.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, like, I don't think it changes a whole lot with
I
scale.
have no idea what goes on at uh like an Asmodee or like
Sure.
a Fantasy Flight or one of the giant ones, right?
Right.
We have kind of the insight on the smaller end of the business model, but
Right. But I don't think it changes. I think the economy of scale changes, obviously, but the general principles of how a game gets made, delivered, and put into a store shelf stays relatively the same, even for them. Right? It's just they get
yeah,
better
yeah.
margins and stuff like that.
It's all a scalability problem, at least the difference between uh the big boys and the small boys.
Right. And scalability really nets that down to finances. But I don't want to go too far into that again. The main thing is if you didn't see that last week, go watch the tail end of last week's show. You'll understand where we're coming from for the top of this show as it kind of serves as a continuation. But the main thing I really want to say is obviously I don't know if I empowered other voices within the community to speak up. I don't know if I got the attention of Stoneblade last week. We got the attention of Stoneblade last week because we were talking about it for most of the show. And but we got a response, right? Like Stoneblade kind of came out from the woodwork this week and put some effort into the community.
Right. Yeah. And I received similar feedback to you of just like people like kind of saying, yeah, we like agree with you on the show. None of it is like, you know, anger or uh like a big, you know, pitchforks and torches kind of reaction, but just people like, yeah, we agree, we just don't have a voice for it. And I'm glad that we were able to, you know, give those people a platform a little bit because they did and to Stoneblade's credit, they did respond.
Right. I mean, Lucas L came out this week, started a thread on the Stoneblade Discord to talk about the communication issues, the game issues, just kind of the overarching, you know, outcomes and lack thereof of outcomes that we've had up to this point, and has agreed to take that back to Stoneblade, as well as laid out a roadmap this week on some of the things we can expect in the future. I don't know if did you see all this, Neil, or did are you playing catch up still?
I'm
Okay.
out of the loop. I've spent a lot of time this week preparing for next week
So
because
this
I
was
leave. My plane leaves to go to Nebraska on Sunday.
yeah. So this was the comment today as of 3:45 Central. Lucas L in the Discord said, "First of all, I want to thank you all for your concern and comments over the past week. We know you all love the game, and we want to continue to show that is something we love and want to continue to see growing. There have been a lot of comments that have been recorded as things for us to work more on. I can't address everything here right now, but I can give you some updates. With Gen Con next week, we will have a few Solforge Fusion announcements about the game's future that we will also be posting about on here and our other platforms. Those of you waiting at home will have to wait until later that first day for an official announcement, but I'm sure someone will spoil the fun for me before I get on Discord after the convention. Starting the week after Gen Con, we will continue with doing weekly Solforge Fusion streams. So that's new. I highly recommend checking them out for some sneak peeks. Also starting that week, I will be doing bi-weekly, once every 2 weeks, Q&As on the Discord with updates on where we are in the process of everything. Very, very cool. There will be continued improvements on marketing of the game, organized play, and the website, and we'll make sure to keep you all posted with that as we venture more into it. Thank you all for your support of this game. You're all the reason we do this. Our team mission is create remarkable experiences that delight, connect, and inspire. I hope we accomplish that for you. I think that, I mean, obviously this is this is a canned response. You can tell by the way the tone is on it that it's not just an off the cuff conversation, but I do think there are some really good things happening here from this conversation.
Right. Even if that's just a PR statement, you know, he addressed essentially every point that we brought up last week.
Right.
And I know that there's been interaction since then as well in the new channel of people, you know, chit-chatting with him in the Discord. So even if it is just like that particular statement is like a PR thing, they're talking about it, they're thinking about it, and if they have big news at Gen Con, that's great. I feel like, you know, literally a week prior is like this is just the same criticism from last week. It could have been better. Like, imagine if a month ago they had said, like, we got big news at Gen Con. Even if that was like we had no idea what it was. Think of all the like discussion and speculation that would have drummed up for a month.
Oh, I agree. I mean, obviously we can't punish for sins of the past, right? We can only ask that we take the steps forward.
The fact that they came out literally the next day, and addressed every point we brought up and interacted with the community. Like I know Tater Tot was in there a ton, and Trey, and just people were in there just chatting and discussing and asking Stoneblade things, and they were responsive. Like that's all that I ask. I don't need solutions to like specific answers to whatever.
Right.
Just having the communication channel open and knowing that uh they want to use it is like essentially what we were talking about last week, right?
Right. I think I mean, so my takeaways are this. The there's a significant amount of discussion going on around the game and what is good or is bad for the game. And obviously, these are all just our own personal opinions of how we believe Solforge could be better. And that puts Stoneblade, just to I want to preface this, it puts Stoneblade in a tough spot because there's no way they're going to please everybody, right? There's just zero chance that's going to happen. And so I want to preface the criticisms that we made with, if they take anything from what we said and change it, great. And if they take nothing from what we said and change it in some other way, great. I will support that. I just want to see exactly the kinds of things that Lucas laid out. I want to be engaged in Soulforge Fusion more so than just within the community and with the community members. I want to be engaged with the things that Stoneblade is doing, right? I want to watch their live streams. I want to see news hit their website and get excited about it and read it and then be like, Neil, did you see this? I can't wait to talk about it on our show on Wednesday
Right.
night.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the things that I want. I don't need it to be tailored to my preferences. And I think as a community, it would do us all good to kind of take that stance. Doesn't mean you have to stay in the game. If they do things you don't like, by all means, our time is precious, and we should do the things that we love and enjoy. And if Soulforge is not providing that fun and enjoyment for you any longer, then that's your choice, and you should not stick around because of that. But if
Right. It was specifically the communication, and we talked about it a ton last week.
yeah,
Like it seemed like there was an opportunity there for marketing and hype around the game that was not being used. And I think that with the communication channels opened in this past week, and with apparently big announcements at Gen Con, that is going to be like that's what we wanted to hear, right? Is that
right.
they're going to rectify that. So
Neil, let me ask you a question here. I want to get your take on this. Do you, at the end of the show, I talked about potentially making Soulforge Fusion more cost effective. Did you hear me talk about this at all?
I didn't.
Okay.
I was struggling.
I understand. I didn't know if maybe you followed up on it later or not.
I was trying to get it on my phone and couldn't, and then
yeah, no, that's fair. So basically, I pitched out there this idea that one of the challenges Soulforge has is the cost, the barrier of entry to play the game. $24.99 for half decks. That's the MSRP. Obviously, there are discount deals everywhere right now, but that's neither here nor there. The idea being that the game is supposed to retail at $24.99, and that out of that you get the four half decks that can make 6 decks, right? Potentially. Obviously, that's really good engagement for 2 players, but if you think about it from a perspective of other small box card games, I'm looking at Star Realms. I'm looking at, Epic used to be in this kind of same realm. Some of these different things, you would be about $10 too expensive to those games.
yeah, and it's quite a different experience than like the deck builders.
Right.
Like I didn't play a lot of Epic. I know that was like semi-competitive. But like Star Realms, it's almost an entirely different experience where I buy a box and you and I can play, and the game is going to be pretty fundamentally different. Assuming that this is brand new to you. Like,
right.
Obviously you played a bunch of Star Realms in your life. It's not true, but like if I buy a box, the starter box Star Realms, you and I can sit down and play, 10 games or something before the experience dries up. Like not that it wouldn't be fun after that, but after that, it's become semi-solved, right?
Right.
We've kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
seen all the iterate. In Solforge, it's a lot different than that
Right.
because we get uh, a pack for the two of us. There's 6 different deck combinations that we can make with that. But I don't know the math if you can actually like play 6 different games with it based on like how the decks are paired.
Right.
It seems like you should be able to, but like after that, and even somewhere in the middle of that, it probably becomes semi-solved
Right.
because we've seen all the cards in each half so many times.
Right.
So I think that comparing it that way is not it's like it's like making the point that you're trying to make, but making it stronger than I think a lot of people will take away from it. That like this isn't really a game that you can just buy one pack of
Right.
and fully enjoy.
And
Some
that's my
people
point.
will,
Right.
but I think it's a minority of people.
So that's my point. My point with it is as such. I'm looking at, and I use the example. I didn't use it last week, but I did use it on the Discord this week of the League battle decks from Pokemon and the Magic competitive, like the pre-competitive Friday Night Magic. I don't remember what they call them. Challenge decks. What do they
I don't
call
know.
it?
I don't even know if they're still doing it.
But they did
I
it for
haven't
a
followed
while,
very
right?
closely.
They did it for a
Right, and
while.
they made like a close approximation of current standard decks
Yeah,
that were
tier
available
one
for
standard decks,
purchase.
right?
Yeah,
And they did that for the entry point on both of those decks was $30. So like, and I'm much more familiar with the Pokemon stuff because they still continue to do it with Pokemon, and I haven't been plugged into Magic for like 5 years, and my kids play Pokemon in the last 2 years, so obviously was more engaged in it. But the Pokemon decks at $30 are literally within $50 of being tier one hyper competitive lists. So, in theory, you could make an $80 investment in Pokemon and have a deck that is capable of winning a local tournament. I don't think we can say the same thing about Solforge.
So
I mean, if you get lucky, but if you're using the
well,
law of averages,
it's almost more a question of what your local scene looks like because Soulforge is weird where essentially, barring crazy RNG, your collection level is going to be on par with someone that like buys the same amount of packs as you. Like obviously that will change at the ends of the bell curve.
right,
Like one kid will roll real bad and one kid will roll real good.
right,
And so he could those one kid could buy $160 of packs and get nothing, and one kid could buy one pack and get the nuts.
right,
But over the course of it, it's like if you have, 6 to 8 people in your local, as long as you and those other 7 people spend roughly the same amount on the game, you're probably in a pretty close collection level place anyway.
right.
So like saying like you need to have $80 invested. Well, it like I don't think $80 invested is enough to that I would want to be traveling for tournaments.
Correct.
$80 invested is the threshold for my local, then yeah, sure, that's probably a reasonable number. Maybe $120 is the investment for my local. It kind of puts the onus on the community to decide what the price of the meta is
Well,
rather than the game, because in games like Magic or Pokemon, the meta is mostly based upon the game that's printed. The good cards rise to the top, the bad cards go to the bottom,
right,
and your investment is not based upon whether your neighbor invests in those cards, right?
right.
Like I invest X amount of dollars, I get X amount of deck, and that's just not how Solforge works.
Right, but would you agree that in the scope of lifestyle games, most people can generally only afford one lifestyle game?
But yeah, that's why they call them lifestyle games,
Right.
right? Because
So
that's
so
the only one you play.
if you're looking at wanting to be a competitive player, then wouldn't it be in your best interest financially to play a traditional trading card game like Pokemon? And I'm not. I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate here. My point with this was that the product path after you get started in Soulforge, or even before you start to get started in Soulforge, people are going to look at what the product path looks like, right? Like they're going to go, how do I get started? And then how much money is it going to take for me to play at a competitive level? The answer to the second question is very difficult to answer because of the RNG of the unique deck system. But
Right.
the
And because the secondary market still has not really settled.
yeah, it's not big. We're not big enough yet to have a true secondary market, to be fair. But let's say, for the sake of this argument, that the secondary market just it's basically non-existent, right? It's non-existent now. And again, I'm not taking anything away from like Trey and the folks that are trying to make a secondary market. Like I think they're doing a good job of trying to make this happen. But
Having a real secondary market, like a realistic secondary market, would improve the game for competitive players.
correct, I agree. But it would also
Um,
change the product path to a point where do you think competitive players would even buy sealed boosters?
um,
If there was a real secondary market, would there be any incentive to buy boosters?
I mean, if you're talking from a perspective of I am only a player and my goal is to play
Let's
at competitive
let's
events,
say your goal is to win
then
world
no.
championship. Let's say your goal is you wanna build a deck, you want to pilot it to a point that it's capable of entering into world champions, and you want to compete to be a world champion.
That's such a tough question. Like if you're breaking it down, if we're putting everything in boxes where like specifically we're talking about a player goal,
Mm-hmm.
not a person goal. This is just like your player robot.
Yeah, yeah. Billy,
Probably the
1 second. Billy Bad Aim is adding that my local is ruthless with Hellkite and Justice Blinded running around. So, yeah, there's a local right there that's going to have a much larger meta
right. So
demand.
if you want to be competitive with those guys, like your threshold to entry is high,
Right.
right? And if you're playing in Juneau, Alaska or whatever, and there's two people there that
Yeah.
bought 4 packs, like you buy 4 packs and you're all happy. And I mean, there are people that buy 4 packs probably in your local that are happy too, right? They may not play with those guys or you,
Right.
but like uh
Well,
some
here's
dad
what.
his kid that played home. But like to get back to your question, yes, I believe that if you are a player robot and your only goal with the game revolves around playing competitive, like high competitive, that and we're making the hypothetical jump that a secondary market exists, then yes, the secondary market is 100% of what you do.
Right.
I think.
That is not
Now,
a good path for Stoneblade, though. Right.
but you there's that's why the player robot doesn't exist.
Sure.
Like that's why talking about it in this fashion doesn't cover all the bases, because what I mean, even just look at the community we have now, right? How many people in the community we have now are player robot? Like none.
I don't know. I mean, it's a good
Like
question.
maybe there's somebody that doesn't interact with the Discord a lot that is, but like there are other baskets that you need to think about. There's uh profit basket. So if you're a business person like Trey,
Sure.
like then you have like some in the player robot basket, some in the business robot basket. There's like Nathis that's a collector, so you have a collector basket,
Right.
right? Like saying that the product path is ruined by the secondary market, I don't think is accurate, because this game specifically, the collector bucket is way deeper
Yeah.
than most games. Like maybe not actually deeper than Magic cards, because it has such a long history that there are things in the game that exist that are so rare and weird and have such high collector's value. We haven't gotten there yet with this game,
Right. Right.
but potentially, like if this game lasts for years, we could, right? Like
I agree. Yeah. I mean, it's a
just because
possibility.
of like when you think about like some of the weirdest, rarest Magic things, um like the blue Urnum gin,
Right.
like a misprint, or the like seasonal um Mishra's factories that there's just a small number of. Like in 20 years from now, if Solforge is still a thing, and we're talking about like how rare those things I named for Magic were compared to the pool of cards that was printed,
Right.
finding a deck that has like a Betrayer Omni in it is going to be much rarer, probably, 20
Sure.
years from now, like by comparison to the pool size.
No, no, I agree.
Um,
I mean, look, where I was leading with this was could Stoneblade create a more organic product path that would incentivize existing players and lower the perceived barrier entry to new players? And that was what I put out last week. And I didn't fully flesh it out last week. I want to be fair. That's we were out of time and I needed to end the stream. But what I was saying was is that there needs to be some sort of starter product. I don't care if it's the starter pack we have now that's got 4 decks and paper play mats and all the stuff, and maybe there needs to be some improvement there on the starter set. But I think the better distribution model for this game would actually be 2 randomized half decks as at a price point of like $12.99.
right. I mean, you asked the question: is there a better product path for existing players to flesh out their collection and for new players? I don't know that a single product like uh solves both those problems. Like if they're problems, if they're like
Sure,
solve those, like answer those questions.
sure.
Um Billy says, I think it's cheaper to buy a competitive deck than to buy boosters and get a bunch of bulk. Also, this is a unique deck game, so we can build similar archetypes but never the same. Yeah,
Right,
right. I mean, but that's just something that we live with when we buy in,
right.
because that's like a core foundation of the game, is that
Correct.
it's never the same. So we can build similar archetypes, yes, um, but never the same. Like it's always going to be this algorithmic dice roll.
This is
So
this is where I'm
I
going
agree.
with it.
I
Yeah.
agree with you 100% that like the options that if they were interested in providing a cheaper product than the booster, which I'm not sure that they are,
No, no, I'm not sure
because
they are either. But
from a business point of view, if they can ship 4 decks at a time in one package, that's probably better for them than like itemizing it. But your idea of 2 random decks, or the first thing that comes to mind for me is like a single random deck of a that's the color.
sure.
So you say like I want to buy a red deck and you get a random red deck. Like those would be the only kind of options that I think make sense.
The issue that I brought up last week with the, like, whether you did the deck pairings like red blue red green, or you just did like a solid, like these are the reds, these are the purples, these are the blues, is that actually increases the SKU count for a retailer to carry the product, which
Yeah,
makes it more difficult to stock, makes it more difficult to put on shelves and to sell through and know how to order
and
appropriately.
the profit margin is definitely lower on that for Stoneblade,
I think
like
the
essentially for everyone in the
I
process.
think the margins are similar. I think
You
the
think that
the
having a like if we're selling singular decks, you think that having a separate like packaging for a single deck as compared to one packaging for 4 decks is going to be
I think it's
similar?
probably not too disseparate. It's probably
Okay,
within
maybe
it's probably within a few pennies. Is what I'm going to say there. It's possible that there's a small dip in the margin, but I'm going to say it's less than a tenth
it
of a
is,
percent.
and maybe I'm wrong because like I haven't looked into it since you and I were, doing
Right.
business, and I don't even remember what our margins were, but just in my brain, making one box, even if it's larger, is cheaper than making four boxes. Just
To a certain extent,
like that
yeah,
math.
to a certain
But
extent,
but
but that really more
uh,
that's more of a logistics thing than it is an actual
right.
manufacturing thing. The
That delves into like the scalability of it. Like how many
Yeah,
units are we going to sell?
the thing that I'm leading into with this is I think that if you go to a product that is optically cheaper, meaning that you're just looking at the product on the shelf, you're thinking about getting in this game, it looks psychologically it looks affordable to play at $12.99.
Right. It's difficult because of what we were talking before when you were comparing to Star Realms, right? Like having a product like Star Realms that's self-contained within the box and is going to play for two people for a reasonable amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like at $25 or $30, is like that's something that a random consumer who may or may not know a lot about the board game space or the card game space, like that's something you can sell to a consumer, right?
Right,
If the problem is that too many people know how games with random packs work.
right,
And so if they make any connection between Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, or whatever with Solforge, then all of a sudden they're like, well, why am I buying a $25 pack? Packs of these other games are $6. Like
right.
obviously you get more product, but it's like you were saying, it's just the psychological part of it. It's
It's
not
the
like a
optics. It's
rational thinking. It's like
it's
it's like
buyer
first impressions.
yeah, it's buyer optics. It's just all it is.
Yeah.
And products succeed off buyer optics. Like I don't care what space you're in. You can be in the game space, you can be selling shampoo. Buyer optics matter, right? I mean, this is
Right.
exactly
It's just like another aspect of marketing.
right, right. So my takeaway was, but as I thought more about this, because last week I was basically on the buyer optics, you know, bus. I was sitting there saying this is the optics that the game needs in order to attract players. But if we move the optics aside and we actually get into the meat and potatoes of sealed and limited formats for Solforge, there's some really interesting things that come out of this. Because now odd numbers are not in trouble from a sealed or limited perspective, because you can set it up in whatever way you need to. Now, here's what I'll say: I think it actually is stronger for draft modes of the game, and I think it's weaker for sealed modes of the game. So I don't think it's perfect.
You're talking about if we had like single or double packs as
Correct.
opposed to.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, so this is going to be a weird take because I don't know how many drafts actually been done since we went to Indy.
And I don't
The
even know how you
draft
draft this game
format,
right now.
and so we did an experimental draft format that Shadow messaged us. He didn't take credit for it; somebody else did, and I don't know who it was, so I
Sure.
apologize to
Yeah. Yeah.
whoever came up with it. Um, where everybody at the table opened some packs, we built decks, yada yada. It was not that fun. Like the any amount of strategical advantage that it had over sealed was not enough to make up for the awkwardness of uh the draft portion,
Sure.
right? So like the benefit of draft is the fun of drafting and uh the idea of kind of semi building your own deck from the pool that you draft and
Right.
drafting cards based upon their synergy and all that, all the normal draft stuff. The downside of draft is the logistics of putting it together, where you have to get a bunch of people sat at a table
Yeah.
and open a bunch of product to pass a bunch of product around. Um, which
I envision this format as being like a snake draft style, where all the
and that
decks are opened and then you snake draft them.
right. I mean, who knows? That wasn't what we did that day. I know that Jurch and Cody had come up with their own draft format that they also tried at Indie, and it was like people liked it. Again, I wasn't in that one, so I don't know like what the give take was on difficulty versus benefit. But in general, draft has seemed like kind of a pipe dream up to this point, just because draft is like deck building, and this game doesn't really have that
Right,
aspect.
right.
Um,
I
so maybe somebody will figure it out or whatever. But I don't think that Stoneblade puts a lot of onus on how good a product is for limited, because the product they have now for limited is about as perfect as you could have for a sealed deck product, right?
except it's
Where like,
expensive.
well, I mean, playing sealed in Magic is just as expensive.
Sure, I agree.
Like, and I don't know what it is in other games, but like it's almost the exact same. Well, I guess it might be more expensive now because I don't know what a pack of Magic cards cost now. It might be $19.
7.99 for
Oh God!
7.99 for their booster
See, we
drafts.
used to we used to charge $25 for a draft for a sealed at Hobbytown, and you get 6 packs.
Yeah,
Uh,
I always
but
thought it
that, I
was.
mean
I thought it was
the
4 packs and 8-man pods.
that's what no, not for sealed. Sealed is 6 packs.
Oh, for
Draft
sealed,
is
for draft is 4. Yeah,
like draft was 4, but it was 3 packs and a prize pack was how they sold it. Like you only need 3 packs per person for Magic Draft, but they would like sell 4 packs so that everybody would get a prize kind of, or you could like we usually just pooled them and like gave out the
right.
8-4 to first second or whatever.
So
Or
the takeaway I had on it was a couple of things that were pretty interesting. One, because you aren't guaranteed a specific color in each of the packs, it would potentially increase the secondary value of the market for decks, because you may be going, I'm looking for this Drix deck, right? And somebody else is going, I hate blue, I'm not going to play Drix ever, and so I have a reason now to put my deck online, even if it's not a particularly great blue deck. Um, I
yeah,
I also think that it's an organized it's a way to have organized play and organically grow existing player bases collections, and therefore sell more product for Stoneblade. And what I mean by that is I'll play week in, week out multiple times in just a buy a box sealed format, run what you get, who cares how it goes, you know, but I pay $12.99 and I get 2 random half decks, and who knows if they actually would benefit my collection in some way or not. But I still am organically growing my collection while I play the game. Versus,
I I guess, and this is just like first impressions. I haven't had any time to think about this product besides when we've just been sitting here because I didn't
sure,
hear your rant from last week. But uh I don't. For me, just first impressions, a random pair as a half price sealed, I think has essentially no benefit over the pack of 4. And this is why. Because I think that the sealed format for one is better with 4
sure, I agree.
because it adds almost a portion of draft to it where you get to make some decisions.
I agree.
If you're playing sealed out of 2 random halves, you're just like that's just 100% gambling, right? There's
Sure.
no skill involved in the deck selection portion. Obviously, play skill still matters when you sit down at the table and you're playing the
Correct.
game.
Yeah,
But the variance will be very high.
I agree. I
From a
think I
well,
this is what I
from
said. I said it would probably weaken sealed slightly from what we have today.
right, and from a consumer perspective, if it's just two random decks at half price, I would still be drawn to one deck of each color because from uh from every from every perspective, like let's say you're new to the game, you probably would, rather than buying two packs of randoms where you might get a double, you would prefer to buy one of each, so you know that you have two complete decks to play like with your friend or your dad or whatever. And if you're an existing player and you have a collection already and you're looking for pairs for decks you have, the only way to guarantee that you would get a deck that could pair with what you're looking for is to buy the pack of four, because you don't like let's say I'm looking for a red deck, right?
Right.
Well, 50% of the time I'm not going to get a red deck when I buy a pack of two.
Right. But that's where I think it
And
increases the power of the secondary market. I think it solves both problems at
but
once.
don't you think if you're the person that's looking for a red deck, right?
Mhm.
Let's say specifically like I have some deck and I need a red deck to pair with it. Don't you think that if I buy a pack of four and I like the red deck, it actually puts more into the secondary market that I have three extras than one?
I think that as it currently sits, that
Yeah,
practice,
Ryan
yeah,
Ryan Ryan says ultimately I think the MSRP at four decks is just too high.
I agree, but I think you can't lower the MSRP of the four decks, right? I think if Stoneblade could put the product out for cheaper, don't you think they would? Like I don't think they're making a cash grab out of it. I think that they're offering it
Agree.
at a
Yeah,
fair
agreed.
price. And so I think the problem is that when you look at it and how the systems work, and I can't imagine what the printing costs for something like this is because of how the system works, but Keyforge kind of hit a disposable income point at $10 a deck, right? And this is my attempt to try and get this game closer to the Keyforge price point. And I don't I do think that it hurts sealed. I agree with Ryan that four decks is better for sealed. I agree. But I do think that I think the benefits outweigh the downsides. And if you still wanted to play four decks, you could, right? You would just be at risk that your four decks you open would all be the same colors, right? Like you
Right. So the problem with from a brand new player's perspective of buying two randomized halves is that 50% of the time you can only build one deck because one of the four colors will overlap. Right. So
correct.
if you buy a pack that guarantees you uh two whole decks, you can play with your friend or whatever for sure. If
Correct.
you and again, maybe if you're looking at this from a business perspective and you want to like bloat the excess decks out there as a result, like then yeah, you're like, okay, well, these kids bought two packs, got an overlap. If you buy your third pack, you're very likely to be able to make two decks.
Correct.
In essence, like pseudo selling 50% more product to a new player.
Right. I think that the common misnomer in these kinds of games is that you need to box them like a board game and be able to offer a multiplayer experience out of the box. Like, I just don't think that's a real thing. And if you want that, this is why I said the starter set still needs to exist, and the starter set can exist with the four random halves at
That's
$30.
that's an interesting take. We haven't like how did Flesh and Blood market their game at the beginning? Did they
They
have
just sold
like a
packs.
two-player thing?
No
It
starter.
was just
They had starter decks. They had hero starter decks. They were $14.99 per hero.
okay.
They came with all common equipment. They had one or two rare hero specific cards, but no majestics, obviously.
Yeah.
And it was those decks were enough to show you the mechanics of a hero.
Well, do you remember like I mean, you've been playing games for a long time too, just like me. Do you remember the Wild West of how starter decks worked in the 90s?
I mean, like I
Like
remember the Magic Alpha starter decks. I opened a bunch of them.
right. Like I mean,
In many cases, they were
I
damn near
didn't
unplayable.
yes. That that's what I was getting at was
Yeah,
like back in the day, you know, uh, I didn't have original Magic stuff. I didn't actually start playing Magic until uh like 2000. But I did experience the starter game phenomenon from um the old Decipher Star Wars TCG
Yeah,
and from a game called um God, what was it called? Guardians. It was Guardians card game
I don't
that was
remember Guardians, but okay.
it was a smaller game. It was big enough that it like had a following, but it was like kind of a 90s only game and then stopped. But this was from an era when the way that they made starter decks was it was like a large booster pack. It had
Right,
a certain number of things in it, but most of it was random. And it had, unlike booster packs, it had the rules for the game in it, printed on a piece of paper that was folded up tiny into what would fit into, like a bicycle card size uh card box. And that was what a starter set was. And that was enough
right,
for people,
right.
right? Like people would buy those and they would like learn the game kind of because your starter deck might not even have the pieces you need to put the puzzle together of learning the game. And then they would buy packs to shore up the difference, right? And that was like how you started your collection. That was how you started into the game. Like this was at a time when the secondary market was almost non-existent. It was like only singles sold in local stores because the big uh the big singles websites didn't exist yet. And that was just how people did it. We just don't sell games like that
Right.
anymore.
No,
You know
no,
what I
I
mean?
agree.
Like it
So
and
I
and maybe
want
we should because that was a thing like you're talking about like the difference between how you sold a board game and how you sold a card game was you sold a card game with the intent that like you're going to buy this starter deck, but this is going to start you on a path,
right.
and that
Agreed.
path leads to you buying more packs.
This is why
We
I
didn't
think
have these like these like player friendly starters that have everything you need.
right. So here's the thing. So Flesh and Blood, after their fourth set, reintroduced a new player product called Flesh and Blood Classic Battles, and it was Dorinthia and Reinar. It was a blitz deck from each of them. I don't know what the deck contents were, but I know that it had an alt art Dorinthia and an alt art Reinar. So it sort of incentivized existing players to even want to go out and pay money for them, right? And Flesh and Blood was pretty unapologetic about the price. Check this out. You can see it on stream, Neil. For since you're not watching the stream, it's $49.99.
And what did this give you?
It gave you two Blitz Flesh and Blood decks, with Reinar and one with Dorinthia. So this was
For
$25 for
$50?
$50. Now, I've never opened one of these. I have a number of them. I've never opened one. I know that they have alt art cards for at least the heroes, and it's potentially possible that they have the hero mentor cards that they introduced at one stage in time as like a promo type card that is playable and competitive because Flesh and Blood seems to never care about how the path to how you acquire cards. They know that they'll end up on the secondary market worth hundreds of dollars, and that's fine. But I don't think you have to do that with Solforge. I think what I'm getting at with this is that I think a starter set at $24.99 that allows two players to play the game also comes with a baseline kickoff of one deck from each faction really does enable you to have a much cheaper booster price. Like I think
Yeah, that's interesting.
part of the reason why starter
Uh
sets don't sell all that well in particular is there's not enough separation between what the starter set is and what a booster is. They're essentially the same. And arguably, I would say that starters aren't even needed. Like if I was making a YouTube video to tell a new player how to get into Soulforge, I'd tell them to skip the starters. Like just
Sorry, Ankh has corrected me. He says, I'm not sure that I understand why having overlapping colors precludes you from playing with a friend.
yeah,
You still have four colors. You don't have four colors represented across both sets. Um, yes, you're correct. If you bought two of Jesse's random pair starters, you would have two decks. And I got that wrong. I should have explained it better. The benefit of having one of each, besides being able to target a color that you want if you're an existing player, is that If you buy a starter deck, you have 6 possible combinations of decks. If you buy 2 randomized and there is an overlap, you have 4 decks, both of which are the same color, or I'm sorry, all of which are the same color pairs.
Yeah.
I think. No, you'd have 5 decks because you'd have 5. You'd have these iterations. You'd have A, B, assuming like the letters are colors. You'd have A, B, A, C. Then you'd have A, C, A, B. Like you could flop them between the players because the A's are the same color but different. And then you could have B, C, but you wouldn't be able to make a deck with AA. So yeah, you're right, Onk. I misspoke. I shouldn't have said that you can't play, but the number of decks that you can feasibly make with your starter is much less. And if you count the like double red you get as one, it's way less. Because like I guess if you get a different Forgeborn in the ones that share a color, like you open 4 decks and 2 of them are red and one's a Sunder and one's a whatever the other guy is, Korok. Then you have pseudo like different red decks, but for the most part, like your pairings are going to be very similar, even if you swap reds.
Right. So again, I'm not saying that they need to change this. I just think it's an interesting conversation about.
It's kind of a strange way to look at it, and I think that you have some good insight there in general about like why this would be good. It's kind of funny that like if somebody sat you down and said, what's a better Solforge product? Like the only possible answer is like what you said, like a random pair or like a random single are like the only things it could be.
Yeah.
So even though we have all this like great backup of why it should be, like essentially it's just like if they wanted to make other product, this is what it is. Because if you start making targeted products, like we were talking about starters in old games or your mid flesh and blood.
We can go back and look at Ashes
starter thing.
Like we can go back and look at Ashes and 21 Phoenix Borns, right? And at the end of the day, some of them sold way better than others, right?
Well, some of them were way better than others.
Well, right, but that's
or the cards in them were way better.
Correct. So that is exactly the problem you have. Is if you have skew bloat, you're going to have retail problems. Look, Marvel Champions suffers from this, right? Like
yes,
if you have, we've seen it with Arkham Horror LCG. We've seen it with all of basically the FFG LCG models, where some packs ultimately just rot on shelves because the cards inside them are not worth the $14.99 price point for their pack, right? And I think that's why Solforge wants to actively stay away from individual packs, even if they are randomized by color. I think that is why they want to. And I want to preface, I think Justin Gary and everybody at Stoneblade is smart enough. They've had this conversation internally.
Yeah. I'm sure that they've been down this rabbit hole way deeper.
Yeah, well, for sure. But I think it's an interesting conversation about.
And from my perspective as a player that wants to play competitively, but still wants to have some amount of collection of my own for fun or just collector's fun, whatever. Like I said, my first instinct at the beginning conversation was that we would have randomized decks, but you could like pick the color.
Right.
But even that, as soon as you start selling a product that is a targeted dice roll,
yeah,
it really changes the dynamic of how the game is made. Because
what if the random pairs had the synergy dialed up?
No, that'd be crazy. That'd be even worse than knowing the color.
That's what
we already know what happens when they change
up,
the
grandfather in the house.
Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming over.
Yeah.
We already know the problem between set 1 and 2 where they changed how the synergy buckets worked a little bit just by having more synergy.
Don't you think set 1's better than set 2 in that respect?
Yes.
Right.
But do I think that you should make a product that is of an existing set that has a different dial, all that would do is
No,
literally
no, 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 no.
like no one would
That's not
buy
what I was
the old
saying.
product.
That's not what I was saying. I was saying the synergy dial for the two random halves would be dialed in to match the set one dial. For what I'm assuming you're not going to go back and reprint set one. I assume you're not going to go back and add any reprints for set two. They like their product cycle is as they are. But I'm saying right now
Right.
set
But
three
that
hasn't been printed. They made that comment this week. It's not been printed, so we're still at least 90 days from a release minimum.
well that I mean that is not product centric. So it doesn't matter what kind of product is sold, whether it's 4-pack or 2-pack
Sure.
or whatever. Like that's just a decision they need to make about what their set design looks like,
Correct. I agree.
as opposed to what their like retail product looks like.
Yeah, yeah.
As far as do I think that I would prefer it to be closer to set one? Yes.
Yeah.
What I really want is just for it to be balanced. Like it
I actually think the best falls in between set one and set two. Like I think set one might be the ceiling and set two might be the floor. And if there's
maybe.
if there's a dial in there that's in between those two, you're going to get much closer, I think. But I don't know.
It just if we go so this again, this is not talking about any retail product. This is just simply about set balance. They can't print cards at the power level of set two or greater with the synergy dial of set one or greater.
Correct.
That would be bad for the game if
Agreed.
any of those things lined up. So it has to be like if you want your synergy dial, which is essentially like it's almost equivalent to like essentially a power level dial of decks that are printed, like average power level. If you want that in between set one and set two, then the power level of the cards needs to be in between set one and set two.
Agreed.
It has to be stronger than set one, weaker than set two.
Yep.
And for me, I don't care where the set lands as long as they have spent the time to balance it.
Right.
And I think that at least over a longer period of time, we've come to the conclusion that yes, they did balance set one and set two pretty good amongst each other, just because like we know the cards are better in set two. We know that the RNG is harder in set two. So what we saw was exactly what you would think of if you followed that line of thinking, where at the very beginning of set two being printed, the set two decks were below the set one decks as they were more widely distributed among the curve. And then as we've moved months and months later, now more decks have been open, more people have had access to them, more people have had access to pairing them. And now we've moved to where, in the League of Champions or whatever we had last week we went over, there were a lot of set two decks, right? And we've kind of come to where I think Stoneblade wanted it to be, because ultimately they had said that they want the set two cards to be a little bit more powerful than the set one cards, because set one is going to be kind of like a starter set type feel.
Well, and what you want if you're Stoneblade is you want each successive set to change up the competitive scene, right? It's good for the game to have a natural progression in the competitive meta. Whether or not that's where we're at in that meta is healthy right now, I don't know. But that's a really good segue into our next segment.
It's kind of a strange thing. Just one more point on this that on what you were saying there about the competitive progression. Normally what we see in the progression of a competitive meta across like a standard format or whatever, in Magic would be like, well, here's a starting point, and all these decks are pretty good. There's some variance there because it's new.
Right.
As we move along, we see changes in, first off, the decks that are actually better than the other decks from point A start to separate themselves.
Yes.
Then sideboard plans come along, like main board changes come along, and you'll actually see like essentially point B begin, where well, now we have these decks that are very similar to point A, but they have different tech because we know, the matchup's better, we know the cards better. In this game, it actually follows the same kind of progression, but in a strange way that's like a weird consumerist way.
Right.
Because it's like, here's point A that contains all these things we think are good. And as time moves, we see the things we think are good separate from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to point B where, again, the decks have changed. The archetypes will remain similar, but the decks have changed. But it's more because people have, during this progression, figured out, well, I need to reach out for this kind of half. I need to reach out for this kind of half. And you end up with like the same progression, but for a different reason.
Sure.
Like it's more about card availability than it is about actual like deck tech.
Right.
But you still follow that same kind of curve. That's kind of a, I don't know. I think that's unique that it kind of works the same way, but for a totally different reason.
Yeah, it's a very good point for sure. Obviously there's a lot of uniqueness in the consumerism model of Solforge Fusion, right? Because we've never seen a game like this on the market. That means that consumer behavior has never been modeled in this kind of environment.
Right. We have Keyforge, but that's not analogous to what we see going on.
Correct.
Right? Like Keyforge would follow half of that the same, where it'd be like, okay, well, set comes out, here's decks we think are good.
Right.
Then
what is
we
up,
find out what decks are actually
in the house.
We find out what is actually good.
Yeah.
And then people take their time acquiring decks similar to what the quote unquote archetype is.
Well, so here's just another perspective on sealed that is really perspective from a new player side. When you open up 4 decks, one of each color, and you're a new player, you have no idea what you're doing. Right? Like if you're a brand new player, never played a game of Solforge, and this is going to be your first experience with Solforge, you can't evaluate red, blue, green, or purple. So the 4 deck model is, in my mind, really more of a competitive sealed event. Right? It's really aimed at how well can the players in that pool that are playing sealed identify which 2 halves are their best halves and give them the best chance to win. If you're brand new, you're not going to be able to do that. You're just not. And that's where I also think the 2-pack booster just makes a friendly new player sealed event very accessible.
Well, I don't know if I agree with that 100%.
Okay.
I mean, I agree with the first half of your assessment. Obviously, new player that is new to the game, like, is not going to know how to play sealed correctly.
Right.
The idea that random 2-pack sealed is different than just like we're at this level. I assume we're just talking about like a teaching game.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like if you start an event, we're always wrong, Joel. Let's be honest here.
I am never wrong, Joel. I have never once in my life been wrong.
That's the correct answer. Neil said it. But I mean, here's what I'm saying. Like at the end of the day,
but I don't see how it's different than just cracking a regular pack in half. In that case, like when you're just having
it's not. But
game.
Cracking a regular pack in half requires you to have 2 players.
Right. So, but we're talking about like
let's say
just kind of a weird hypothetical where a player wants to someone who's never played the game before wants to enter a sealed event.
Take it another step back. Let's just take it another step back. Let's say you're an ambassador. You're what I think they call them Forge Guardians. Let's say you're a Forge Guardian for Solforge Fusion at your local game store. And you go to your local game store and you say, hey, I'm going to run this Learn to Play. And, I want players that show up to have an opportunity to keep the decks that they play with. They automatically, let's just assume they have a normal margin. They automatically have their 40% margin in the product. And they go, okay, so that means that I'm per player, I'm exposed at a rate of $6 per player, roughly. Let's call it $7 per player. if they don't charge anything. If they decide to charge something, they're most likely going to charge 10 per player, right, for that learn to play experience in order for them to keep their decks. But they're at risk that the other, if three people show up, then the other two half decks that didn't get distributed are lost. What are you going to do with them? Who do they go to? Where do they
Sure.
go?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, if your specific goal is to handle odd numbered teaching events, then I agree
yeah,
that the two app decks is better.
yeah. I'm just saying, like,
I
I just think it fits a mold better across a wide swath of potential scenarios where this product could be living. But and again, I want to say that 80% of my argument is based on player optics. It's based on buyer optics.
Right, yeah, yeah. Which I mean, I 100% am on board with the like 12.99 or 12.49, whatever price point is um
They can't go for a price,
is
Joel, because
better
the store hasn't covered
like
their costs.
marketing is better marketing as like you were saying, like a first impression kind of thing, like selling to just an average player kind of thing that is new to gaming or is a board gamer or whatever. Like it $25 feels like a big investment and $12 does not. It's
Right.
just a psychological thing. And
You
I
got a
agree with that.
12-year-old kid.
I
$25 is a
I
lot more
think
money for a
that
12-year-old kid than $12, right? Like, I mean, it's just distilling
yeah,
it
yeah.
down.
I mean, it's just I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't know that this is an accurate um I don't know that it is enough better than what they have now that it's worth it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't know. We haven't sat down at the Stoneblade tables and heard like the reason that they do it the
Oh,
way
for
they
sure.
do.
Yeah, no.
And
We're purely speculating in this conversation.
yeah, I um uh
Six,
grandfather says
six,
I'm
yeah,
not a Forge Guardian, but I did host free teachings at Gateway Boosters
boosters
worth
worth of
of deck.
decks.
Yeah, for 2 months at Star City Games, and the crowd died so fast due to lack of any marketing. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that that's the case. You know, that was kind of our discussion last week, but
Yeah.
we're just talking about potential like a future product that would um allow for easier entry.
Yep.
But yeah, along grandfather's point there, like another thing to take into account is the marketing.
Yeah.
Like if we're gonna invest some time and energy in producing a 2-pack product, like a 2-deck pack, uh, you know, we already know that their team is stretched thin. Would it be a better use of their time to spend that time and energy just on marketing what they have?
Oh, I agree. No, I 100% agree.
Who
They
knows?
should not be considering retooling packaging and retooling product if they're stretched,
Yeah,
right? Like I'm just saying,
which we know they are. Like
right? Yeah.
it's a fairly big company, but they have other balls in the air than
Yeah. No, I
just
completely agree.
Solforge, and we know that like they had some developer issues that took Shadow's time, and I know that Alex works very hard, and he's in 5-hour different time zone, and he's traveling all over, and so we'll see. But
Yep.
Joel says, so as much as I love decreasing price, Larcana is selling boosters for $6.
That's actually cheaper than Magic. I'm sure that's a
I
very
was gonna say
strategic decision.
that sounds about right based on what you said for Magic.
Yeah. Because Magic is currently
What
selling boosters at
but
$6.99 a booster. I'm
but
not sure
what
where
comes in
Flesh
a
of Blood is
Larcana
though.
booster? That's what we should. That's like the real values. Like Magic boosters, 15 cards. Yu-Gi-Oh boosters, like 8 cards for 2/3 of the price or whatever. Um, Let me see if they have a. All right, let's see. Give me
Lorcana.
a Yeah, I'm just googling like what their product structure looks like here. God, is it weird that like I kind of don't want to play this game?
Lorcana as booster is one foil card, two rare, super rare, or legendary cards. 3 uncommon cards, and 6 common cards.
So it's 11 cards.
11 card booster. One's a foil card of a random rarity level. So this is actually a pretty similar pack model to Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable to me. That seems like a good price point. That seems like a good like randomized booster pack value.
Actually, a Flesh
You
and Blood
know,
booster is 16 cards, so there's 5 more cards in a Flesh and Blood pack.
what does a Flesh and Blood pack retail for?
I'm just going to pull up the first link here, everybody. Well, that's European dollars. That's not going to help us. um, and that's their official release. Wow. Um,
$7.99.
$7.99. Okay.
Yep. Uh,
Yeah.
so just that's essentially the same as Magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Magic has 16 cards in it now too. It's like 15 the 15 cards it always has been, one rare.
So at 11
Uh,
cards, they really needed to be $2 cheaper just to set like a fair price point.
right, yeah, that seems totally fine. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we're
Um,
just there are collector packs in Magic that cost more, Joel. There are,
well, yeah, there
I mean,
Magic has too many products
yeah,
now.
yeah. But if
They're
you're just
putting out
looking,
like multiple sets at a time now, and like it's I don't know.
if you're looking
But
at Magic as a player perspective, then the booster draft boxes and the booster draft packs are what you want, because those are the
well,
non-special editions. They don't have any
it,
crazy collector cards in them, and so that's
right,
the
if
baseline
you're not a
product.
child, if you're not a child and you're not a collector, you should only be buying singles or boxes of boosters.
Okay,
Though I guess I don't even know if most retailers do a box price anymore.
so
At
Lorcana has obviously has colors of some sort. I don't know what they represent. I can't tell. If you're looking on the stream here, there's, I'll send you this link. That it's their product page. Since we're a week away from official launch, we should be able to discern some of this because it's going to be shown at Gen Con next week. But basically, it looks like they have 3 starter sets that are available. The 3 starter sets that are available, I have no idea what they are other than the characters on the front, is what it's saying. So 1 starter deck of 60 cards, including 2 foil cards of the characters on the package front. So it looks like you can get Moana, Mickey Mouse Mage, you can get Cruella and Gaston, I think is who that is, or supposed to be. And then you've got Snow White and Mufasa. You get 11 game tokens, a rule book in each one, and then a booster pack containing 12 randomized cards. So what does this sell for? What's a Lorcana starter deck sell for?
I'm gonna give Dan a quick shout out if we're talking about Lorcana,
Oh, that's fine.
because he still does some Marvel Snap content,
Looks
but
like around $35.
Because Marvel Snap meta has not changed in months. Uh, he he and Scott have started doing Lorcana stuff.
Yeah.
So go to they've rebranded their YouTube to the Forbidden Mountain.
Okay.
So check
Yeah,
out the
if
Forbidden
you're
Mountain
interested in
on
Lorcana,
YouTube for
check out Forbidden
Lorcana
Mountain.
content.
Yeah, I agree. We're not that, but I just was
Yeah.
I'm really looking at just from a consumerist standpoint right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. We should continue down this rabbit hole. I'm actually interested in it, but I just wanted to give
yeah,
Dan a
it
shout
looks
out
like
because
you could buy a starter deck for $35 right now, single player starter.
and what does it say comes in it? Is
You
this
get a foil version of the 2 heroes on the front of the box. So like of the 3 boxes that are out there, like I said, you can either get Moana and Mickey as a foil heroes, and then you get a 60 card deck. We don't know what that contains, but I would assume it's mostly commons and rares. I don't think you're going to get any crazy cards in there. 11 tokens, 1 rulebook, and then a booster pack containing 12 random cards. So
right?
you get 1 booster here, and it's $35. So we know a booster is worth $6, so they're really saying $28 for the starter set. So Solforge being a 2-player pretty much all Solforge now, Billy. Um, oh, oh yeah, he's talking about he was playing Magic and then is converted to
Yeah, yeah,
Solforge
yeah.
now. Okay. The the thing I'm taking away from this is that number one, the starter set for Solforge is probably correctly priced. I don't think it's incorrectly
Sure.
priced. I think the only thing that we're talking about is the ongoing dollar sink into the game being incorrectly priced at
It does
$25.
feel very different
Yeah.
because like so this is going to be some psychological stuff because this is how the CCGs get you, right? Is
Yep.
like you buy your I'm looking at these here. It looks like this one is Cruella de Vil and Aladdin
Yep.
in it. Um
Is it Aladdin or is it Gaston? I couldn't tell for
that's
sure.
that's definitely Aladdin.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. This tells you how
Um
great I am on Disney
I have
characters.
to like zoom in on it because let's see. I
I
made it
didn't know
real
if it was a
big.
villain pack. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, I think it's Aladdin. I but anyway, so you buy your Cruella Aladdin starter or whatever. It comes with one pack,
right.
and you're playing with your friends or whatever, and you're like, oh well, I wish my deck was better, right? It's a different psychological feeling to purchase. Like, well, it would be like 3.5 boosters of Lorcana
Right.
to essentially be an additional pack of Soulforge. It's like I'm gonna buy 2 packs of Lorcana and I'm gonna add these cards to my deck, to make it better.
Right.
Well, you don't really get that from Soulforge,
No.
right? It's like you have to think of your collection more as like what you're trying to improve rather than any specific deck.
Correct.
So it's just like a different draw because I can't go buy Soulforge packs for the most part to make my deck better, right?
Right.
I can make my deck different. I can potentially make my deck better if I have a replacement for what I have now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same feeling as knowing that like, okay, well, I opened this pack of Soulforge and I'm looking for a better pair for this, Nova deck that I have or whatever it
Right.
is. Um, that I may or may not get. 75% of these cards could be that, but they may not be. Whereas if I have a starter deck from Lorcana or Flesh and Blood or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, and I say, okay, well, I'm going to buy 2 packs, and in those 2 packs, I'm going to get 20 to 30 new cards, and I'm like pretty positive that a couple of those are going to go in the pile, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
I know that it's very very low chance that I miss on my goal. It's medium chance that I'm going to do better than that, and you get like
And
essentially both games have the same ceiling for dopamine where you hit the nuts and like open something crazy.
right. But here's the other side of that, right? Like, even if you open a pack that does nothing for your deck, there's a very good chance you're opening something that you can uh, jockey yourself in the secondhand market to get what you want for your deck. Meaning that you can
Sure.
either
Yeah.
sell the super rare card in the pack, or sell or trade the super rare card for another super rare card. Like, there's
That's definitely true for all of the like, the big four now and most of the second tier of popular games. Like
correct. Yeah.
TCG players sell singles for all the uh anime franchise games and
So
everything.
so let me ask you a question.
Um
Do you think from a player demographics perspective, I know it's not completely true. Obviously, nothing is absolute. But do you believe a game like Soulforge is more likely to attract? I don't know how the best way to say this without sounding condescending or something, but uh, somebody that's more miserly with a trading card game.
that's a weird question. Um
Because I think you got to know your player base, right? You got to know who you're attracting to buy your product.
I think that it first off, like let's define miserly. I'm not sure I understand.
Well,
I'm not sure I understand like on what spectrum we're talking here.
well, okay. So like we all know the Magic player, right? That like he goes out, he buys his starter deck, he gets started, he maybe buys 2 or 3 boosters, he maybe makes some trades, he gets his deck going a little bit further, but he dreams of buying the tier 1 cards that are $20+ a card. right? Like but he doesn't have the capital, the cash flow, or chooses not to if he has it, spend that money to put 100, 120, 150, $200 into a deck, right? Like he or she, I shouldn't be gender specific here. He or she doesn't choose
So, all right,
chooses a path, a buying path, a consumer path inside a trading card game where they never have a great deck because they either financially can't afford to buy a great deck or financially choose not to buy a great deck and
okay,
instead
so
just make small incremental purchases towards
let's
improvement.
let's break it down on two spectrums then.
Okay.
Two player spectrums. One is like competitive goal,
Yeah.
and one is financial goal.
Correct.
Okay, so in this gradient from, well, I'll start with the competitive goal because that's easy. So we'll say
Sure.
like kitchen table casual to wants to be the world championship at all
Right.
costs. There's your competitive spectrum. The financial spectrum again starts at the kitchen table investment
Right.
and goes to what is essentially like the gotcha whale investment,
Right.
which exists in all card games. It's not just Solforge, right?
Correct. I agree.
Like there are people out there that want to own one of every magic card
Right.
or four of every magic card or
Yeah.
whatever, So, okay. In these spectrums, I think that on the competitive spectrum, Solforge is like, this is gonna sound so like I'm just punting this question. Like this is the easy answer. I think it's right in the middle.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that if you're a world championship at all costs, Solforge is not like you are not the target audience of Solforge.
I agree.
Um, and I also don't think right now that the target audience of Solforge is at the bottom end either, the kitchen table player, for a lot of the reasons that we spent half the show talking about, right? Because many of your points about the financial investment being a barrier to new players is true.
Yeah.
So that really puts the competitive level, like the player level target audience, in the middle of this competitive spectrum where you have to care enough about card games that you want to play it.
Right.
And in order to want to play it, you have to make a reasonable monetary investment.
Yep.
Also, you have to be aware that playing it at the very, very top level is going to be very, very expensive.
Yep. Agreed.
So that the average Soulforge player, I assume, is somewhere in the middle of like somewhere between like I go to Friday Night Magic every night.
Mm-hmm.
I make updates to my deck weekly or bi-weekly.
Sure.
And to the upper end of the spectrum is like I will travel 2 to 3 hours maximum for a tournament that I care about that's close.
Yeah.
Like that to me seems like the correct spectrum of player. Because I don't think that there are a lot of Soulforge players that exist that are going to travel further than that. Obviously, like you and I are an exception. Many of the people that watch this show are an exception,
Right?
Because we've all been to like Denver or Indy or whatever.
Well, I haven't yet, but
it still wasn't like you're.
I went to Tulsa.
But that's true. That counts. So I think that's where the competitive level is now.
Yeah.
The financial investment part mirrors that to a certain extent, right? Like. But I think that Soulforge has like a weird skip gap in it in the financial end where essentially what I said about the competitive level is same for financial. It's not really a kitchen table thing. There aren't going to be a lot of people that go out and buy one $25 pack and play their, 6 iterations of matchups from that only and stop. Or at least that, there will be people that give it a try like that, play a couple games and put it away forever.
Sure. Yeah.
But people that are like actual players are not going to be players at that level. So they'll be like, an $80 investment, $120 investment. A lot of those base level investments match the retail product.
Right.
So one that's easy is just like a display cost.
Correct.
Is like something somebody will say, like, I'll buy a display of this set.
Right.
And those people will exist. So there'll be people that play like a display of every set as they come out because they want to experience it on a greater level than just one pack, but don't want to dive in. up to the competitive player that will travel, like I said, because you have to add the travel expenses. You have to add the um any outside expenses that you spend, time expenses
Yeah.
playing the game, right? So like the top end of that would be like the people I just mentioned,
Yeah.
like the people in our current audience that have traveled many hours to go play the game or whatever. That's like the top end. But then I think there's then a valley of nothing.
Yeah.
And then
I
there's
agree
a
with that
few.
valley is there. That valley
So
is
then
real.
but then I think there's another spike of investment that's the whales that
Yes.
follow like the gotcha model. So like we'll get up to, you know, myself, Jurch and Cody, grandfather, that kind of investment level. And then there'll be the next person up from there is like $5,000 in every set
Right. Right.
because of the gotcha about like the gotcha type collectors aspect of this game.
Correct.
So I it's like hard to describe that on a
Yeah.
linear progression, but I think that exists. And I'm not even sure that exists because I've never talked to those people. I know that people that like Trey or whatever that own the store
Yeah.
have an investment like that, but that's a little different because that's like a retail product investment rather than a
Right.
collector's investment.
I definitely know that like they're I've heard of other store owners that were opening large amounts of products in set one. I haven't heard those stories as of late in set two. But
Right.
Joel asked a pretty good question here, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I think I have my own take on it. Is Solforge an old fart game for people who can't spend time to build MTG decks anymore?
I don't think there's a simple answer to that question.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, if you want a yes or no, I'm gonna say no.
Right.
But if you want a real answer, I think the answer is like there is a market of people out there that think like that. So, and I don't know that old fart is the correct term because I don't think that all the people in that marketable space are old.
Sure.
It's just I think that there is a population of card gamers that don't want to build their own decks. And
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
not and some people are going to get this wrong. It's not the same people that like play the best deck off the internet because that's a different mindset than what I think you're talking about, Joel. Obviously, like there are people out there at the high end competitive that will just play the best deck off the internet, and that may or may not be because they are deck builders themselves. It's just because in order to compete at that level, that's what you do. You use the information you have. But
35 plus is old fart. So Neil, we're old farts, man.
that's just like that seems targeted and uncalled for. I don't, but I think that there is a population of card gamers that just like to play dueling card games, and they like to have the decks built for them already because not only is deck building a strain on the amount of like mental energy and time that you may have for the game as a whole, but it's also the kind of thing that leads you down the financial uh the financial like rabbit hole, right? As you start wanting to build your own decks, you start wanting to purchase more product. That's just like, that's kind of how it always goes. So yes, Joel, I do think that there is a population of gamers that will play a game like this because of that. I think that those are the same kind of gamers that play a game like Dice Throne,
Yes.
where it's like a nice dueling card system, but they're like, here's the decks, go play, right?
It's a board game. I mean, it's a board game with cards, but it's a board game.
Right. So yeah, I think that that exists. Do I think that that's the majority of players in this game? I really don't. And I could be wrong because the majority of my interaction with players in this game is with you guys, as our chat or in our Discord. and I know for the most part those people are gamers, and they're like the I spent an hour and a half in the car with the Creef brothers over the course of the weekend, not all at once, but just over the course of the weekend, discussing like played L5R, played Magic, played X-Wing, and I've had that experience with essentially everyone that I've interacted with that shows to me those people are not turned off by not building decks, but they also like to build decks in the other games that they've been competitive in. So I think the majority of players, that's not like the draw. It's just like a staple of the game. So it doesn't detract or add their excitement for the game. But I agree that there is definitely a population out there that this game sells to because of that.
Yeah, I agree with your statement, Neil, that there are people that are buying this game because of the simplicity of Joel's comment. I actually believe the reality of this game is a little different from how even you view it, Neil. I think that if you're interested in Solforge, your only real outlets besides playing within your local community are these online tournaments. And that thrusts you into the highest levels of competitive play that exist in Solforge. And so I think the actual mental energy, time, and investment to be competitive, if that's your choice, you don't have to be competitive. If you choose not to be competitive, run whatever you want to bring. But I'm assuming that when you make the decision to enter an online tournament, then you're going to be, if you've enjoyed your experience and you want to do it again, you're going to go down a rabbit hole that puts you in a place where you're absorbing an immense amount of time in research of decks, secondary markets, and what decks are for sale, what your collection looks like. And I think it's actually, in some ways, more exhausting than a Magic or a Flesh and Blood, where there are professionals that are doing this for you on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, publishing articles all over the web about this is the tier 1 red deck, this is the tier red, green, blue, red deck. That you get where I'm going with this. That
Right. That kind of circles back to our discussion from last week. Like Soulforge definitely could be that.
Sure.
But that requires the community to be larger. That requires there to be content creators out there. That requires there to be communication from Stoneblade. Like we have to have stuff to talk about, because essentially what you're describing is what we try to do.
Correct.
Right. And
but I think that it's impossible.
Not that we're very good at it, but
but it's impossible to replicate that. That's where I'm going with this. Soulforge. Soulforge is, you can't replicate that 100%. You can do that in other card games. So, like, if my goal was to go play competitive card games,
I think I don't agree with that.
Really? That's interesting.
I believe the analysis would be different.
Sure.
But the analysis between Magic and Flesh and Blood is different, right?
Sure.
Even if they're, Channel Fireball covers both, and they have like bi-weekly articles or
similar format.
They have a certain number of content creators that do it, and they're closer together than Soulforge would be. But like, if you and if the Shuffle Bus employed Ryan Creech or Grandfather or whatever, and we were writing articles twice a week, we could produce an amount of content for the game like that, and it wouldn't be the same as Magic, right? Like it would be stuff like you were talking about, like that competitive players should spend their time on, which is like collection level and the market, and we kind of highlighted a couple weeks ago that the Greg's deck from Indy and Denver was on eBay, and like what the price was, and how that affects people's like is $350 an investment you would make into that to increase the value of your collection by competitively by a large margin. And it's just because we can't say we can't write an article that says well, 3 copies of Jace the Mind Sculptor plus one in the sideboard is better than 4 in the main, doesn't mean that we can't write content or video content that is as applicable to the competitive Solforge as anyone can for Magic or Flesh and Blood or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever. It's just that those games have the advantage of 10 times, 100 times the number of people doing it.
Sure. And they've got literally, I mean, when you talk about the pro teams, they're smashing enough games week in and week out to really understand the nuance.
Right. That really is a like, when we're talking about like mental energy and time and effort, like you think about one, the amount of time, effort, and energy that we put into doing one stream a week for 2 hours.
Right.
And then for the two of us, and like we do,
we do the bare minimum.
We go by the seat of our pants or whatever. Jurch and Cody, two people.
Yeah,
they put together
much more organized.
A podcast all the time, and they have a lot of good content. But like the people that create for Channel Fireball alone, let alone TCG Player or Star City or whatever, or even Wizards, like they have their own internal stuff. It just, the amount of man hours that are available for making the content is huge. And then when you take into account the amount of man hours that are played in the game,
yeah,
and the amount of results that are given any given week that they can report on, that's infinity times what we have for Solforge. And that's not a bad thing. Like, Solforge is not Magic. They don't play, like, there aren't 5 million games played every day on a digital app of Solforge like there are on Magic Arena.
Well, I think what it boils down to in my mind is this really is developed by having constructive commentary from the community because we're too small, right? So like content creators, yes, could Shuffle Bus put out a weekly deck article, right, that talks about like a deck archetype, like let's just say Krogius and Circe's Army Commander. We could talk about that deck, right? We can adequately say these are the core cards you should be looking for in your 2 half decks to make it successful,
right? And you could have some kind of market analysis that say like, here's 10 examples of decks that almost fit the criteria we just talked about in the article,
right, that
are on eBay or on Tess's weekly spreadsheet or from Trey's shop, whatever.
Right. No, that's all I'm saying. We could definitely make all that happen. It's the time commitment to do it, and then it turns into a job, and being a job is fine as long as you're being paid for the job. We're not being paid for the job, so there's really there's no incentive to pursue that, and then take nothing away from this as a community. I would love nothing more with my time than to spend 10 hours a week on Solforge, right? But I can't do that. I don't have that bandwidth in my purview between
right. When we were doing 15 to 20 hours on Ashes every week, that was too much.
Yes, it leads to creator burnout, especially when there's no reward for that. And please understand, like, yes, I could open a Patreon, and yes, I could ask you all to give me $15 a month or $10 a month or $5 a month or whatever the number is, and that would be monetary. But please don't take this the wrong way. It's just not enough to be worth it. Like, the community is too small.
We definitely value everybody's interaction with us. Like, we do this because we enjoy it.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
But
100%.
Doing more than what we do now, like, it starts to get intrusive on the thing. Like Joel said when from a little while ago, actually, when we were talking about his question about time spent on the game. He said, from my perspective, with 3 kids now, mental energy and time, I just can't do that anymore. Sticking 2 decks together and figuring that out is much more manageable. Yeah, I mean, that's totally fine, and we all get it. Like, we all have demands on our time, and if you're the kind of person, you're listening to this podcast, and you value our time enough to just listen to it, we really appreciate that, because like, you could be doing a lot better stuff than listen to me gab on for 2 hours.
Right. Well, that's very true. We all could be doing better stuff than listen to you gab for 2 hours.
Yeah, but you would never get the density of someone being right
Yes,
all the
that's
time
that's
as you
true.
do in this 2 hours.
The
Like,
amount of
you just want to hear
correctness,
perfectly accurate
the amount of
data.
correctness in this
It's
2 hours is staggering, folks. It's
yeah, it's just
staggering.
it's off the charts. Uh,
But
but
I mean, my why is, Neil. I mean, you and I used to do this in person, right? Like pre-COVID, we got together every week and we live streamed 2 hours of games. That's what we did. That's what the Shuffle Bus
yeah, it was
started
fun.
as, and we had a great
Even
time.
before that, we did it online some too when you had the TTS mod for Solaria.
Right? Exactly. We
Those
did
old
that.
Solaria streams were fun. We randomly had like Frank or
Yeah.
John
Oh
on,
yeah,
and
yeah.
like
Like half the development teams in the chat, and that's the only people in the
yeah,
chat. But
yep,
but the reality of it is that I do this, Neil, because you moved away from me. Like, let's be honest. I'm staying exactly where I'm supposed to. You moved away from me. And so this is my opportunity to hang out with my friend. And it may not be in
right.
person, but it's an opportunity for me to hang out. And that's what this whole live pod is about. It's about us hanging out and shooting the shit over a game that we both enjoy talking about. And guess what? We get to bring a bunch of friends along for, like, it's like a cup of coffee at a coffee shop talking about it, right? Like, and that's all we want this stream to be. We do care about competitive gameplay. I think Neil and I both have competitive goals for our Solforge playing side, but I would say that our competitive goals are not aligned to be world champions, right? Like we want to follow those people and we want to interact with those people who will be world champions, because I
I
think
mean, I would like to be world champion. I can't say that I
oh
would,
man,
but like I currently do not have like I know that I don't have the skill currently or the time to put into gaining it right now. You
sure,
know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
yeah.
can I say that I don't want to be world championship of Soul Forge? No, I would like that, but
I think I'm setting much more realistic
I
goals.
also have a reasonable expectation of myself, you
Sure,
know.
yeah. I think I've set much more reasonable goals because I am a very, I mean, Neil can attest to this for people that don't know me. But I honestly can attest that, like, if I said I wanted to be world champion, if I put that into my mental space, like, I would be sucked into a very, very dangerous rabbit hole. Like, I would be,
You're a very competitive person,
and
that
I'm
is for
very
sure.
driven. Like, I'm
Yeah,
extremely
yeah.
driven. Like, I want to win. And so I do that, I activate that part of my brain in my business life. I activate that part of my brain as a dad. I activate that part of my brain as a husband. Like, I want to be the best at those things, and those things being demanding my best are so much of a demand on me that there's just no chance for me to be best at a card game. It's just not. And so I have to set realistic expectations, or I would be the guy that literally plays 100 games a week and I spend 100 hours a week on something. And obviously that's not healthy, right? Like, that's an unhealthy behavior. I don't think anybody should commit that kind of time to it. And if you can do that and that's what you want to do, by all means, you do you. But I see that as unhealthy, and I'm not living the best balanced version of myself that I could be. So I have to set much more realistic goals. So for me, my realistic goals are the tournaments that I get a chance to play in. I'd love to top 8 them, and if I can do better than that, then great. That's just where it's at for me. So
Yeah, sure. I
yeah,
mean, we all have stuff. We all have goals. Like, just you just have to be realistic about where you spend your time and energy.
right, right. So Neil, we only have like 12 minutes to unpack this next topic, and I don't even know if we want to broach it.
There's no way that's going to happen.
Yeah. So do you want to broach it, or do we want to hold it for post Gen Con?
I mean, there's no way we're going to be talking about it next week because next week will be
Yeah, we're on the road next Wednesday, so
and
there's no live stream next Wednesday.
right. We will have hopefully have recorded World Champs games for you next week
Yes.
on Friday or Saturday or both, but it may not be until we come back. It depends on the hotel internet.
Right.
We also probably won't talk about it for weeks after Gen Con because we will have World Championship stuff to talk about. We will have storyline stuff to talk about. We will have whatever fancy, crazy announcement they have at Gen Con to talk about. I
Do you want to
like.
get together offline sometime this week and just record a quick conversation between you and I about it, and we'll throw it up on our YouTube
I
channel
don't
next week?
know. It's going to be the same thing I say every
I
time.
know that, but you got to
Like
remember.
I don't even want to talk about it. It's just so dumb.
Fair enough. We don't have to then. We'll
Like,
just let it
no,
fly.
okay. Everybody wants to know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
most already do. Like,
yeah.
so people are complaining about Rumble Spark,
Yep. Nova Elementalist and Rumble
and,
Spark embodiment.
and they're just like, we need to change this, rah rah rah. And like, it's funny because when we had the discussion about Mads LeWinter, I said, what's the next thing they're going to go for? Are we just going to have a conversation in a couple months about Rumble Spark? Well, here we are.
Yep. Here we are.
Welcome to that conversation.
And obviously,
And
the big conversation is centered around Rumble Spark embodiment and Darkheart Sorcerer and its interaction, and whether or not Rumble Spark embodiment should be modified in some way. Some suggestions have been to be just when it does combat damage, for example, that it actually transforms into the embodiment, that the energy transforms. So this would allow for more chump blocking and less consistency on the embodiment. Because for those of you that don't know, I've got the Rumble Spark energy up right now. Well, we could do that too, Billy, but that's not the same.
I don't
obviously.
want to.
Yeah.
Not that I don't respect any, like, the people in here, I'm sure you have valid opinions about it. We could talk about it. But, like, I'm just so sick of hearing communities like, this is the best thing in the game. We should nerf it. Like, that's just like a constant attitude in all games.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a video game or...
Like, it doesn't matter what it is. That's exactly right. Whatever is best is bad for the game. And so we ban it or re-errata it or whatever, and then something else becomes best, and then that's bad for the game. And then we ban it or errata it. It's literally what I talked about with Mads LeWinter. It's literally what I talked about 10 different things in Ashes. Like, I don't get it. Like,
so Joel's adding it's not just Darkheart but Vampiric and Shambling. Yes, I agree that there are adjectives, Joel, that can
right,
this.
Joel. It's the words that are printed on Rumble Spark energy.
Yes,
we know it's good. We've been talking about how good it is for months since Set 2 is printed or previewed or whatever.
My like, takeaway from that is though the most consistent
things
version
can be good.
Yeah, the most consistent version of it is Darkheart, right? That's the most consistent version. So the Vampiric can do it as well, no doubt. But Vampiric generally is a deploy effect, so it happens one time. Shambling...
Well, there's two versions of it, right? Like, Vampiric is better when the Rumble is in Exalt mode.
Sure.
Darkheart is better when Rumble is Rumble mode.
Right.
That's like the thing, right? And it doesn't have to be Vampiric. Like, I have a Rumble deck that has a if you played a spell, activate, deal a damage guy, that's essentially the same thing.
Sure.
Like, so there's like a million ways to do it. Like, we all know how dumb it is.
So my takeaway from this, though, and I want to make this comment. I did make this comment on the Fifth Cycle Discord because I think, yes, people 110% want to take the boogeyman of any given format and shut it down. I mean, Joel's shouting nerf in our chat right now. That literally tells you exactly.
He's just trying to set me off.
I know he is. The reality of this is far more nuanced, and the thing is that yes, Stoneblade Entertainment come out tomorrow and say we're changing the way Rumble Spark Energy works. Cool, changes it. There will be a new best. If Rumble Spark Energy, there will be a new best. That is a fact. There will not be a perfectly balanced meta. Whether that's green purple life gain comes back to the top, whether that's Krogius somehow emerges as top tier.
We're all like 95% sure now they're going to announce Set 3 stuff at Gen Con after what they said, right?
Right.
So 95% chance we're just going to start seeing Set 3 cards. There's going to be some new card in Set 3.
Yeah,
right. Like,
I agree. That's what I'm saying. Like,
it doesn't matter what it is. the fact is that like and it's worse in this game, I think, than in other games, like the any possible reaction to it, because even if Rumble Spark is the most busted card in the game and crazy like Mazla Winter was, like it was
Yeah.
actually game breaking, everybody doesn't have it. It's not everywhere. They like it's just
Well, I think this is sitting on the back of ML Vanby ran a number of silver events recently. I'm not sure how he did that, but he was able to run some small localized silver events. And Joel sent me a link to them. I think there were 6 of them that he ran. Is that right, Joel? Since you're here,
I mean, we don't have to say how good it is, right? Like we did our own show last week or the week before talking about the League of Champions, and there were 3 of them in the top 4. Like it is good. It's obviously good.
I'm not seeing anything come up, so I don't know.
It's just like
Oh,
the
here we
argument
are.
for me
Yeah,
is
Voyeur
is
League.
not specific to Rumble, right? It's
Okay, so here's a Voyeur League, and I mean, unless there's something I'm not seeing here, Voyeur League had 3 tournaments run, and the number of players at silver events in these tournaments was 3. Bambi, Carton, and Nathison. I mean, what are we? Are we really talking about that?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I'm so there were silver events, online silver events recently ran.
Joel is saying something and won't save the dates in the link, so you have to self do it. I don't know what that means.
Okay, so I'm going back to June 1st. Is there more than that?
It I don't want to stay on for another half hour and talk about
Yeah, no,
this.
no, no. It's fine.
Like it's just like yeah, we're starting to see results where Nova's doing good, right? And Nova is a frustrating card to play against. It is very, very good and operates in a way that gives you a lot of free card plays.
Which is
Like,
which is card advantage in this game.
which is like obviously what you want to be doing in the game. But like, I don't. If we see Worlds next week and there's 7 of 8 decks are Nova decks, like, fine, it's too good. I still wouldn't advocate doing something about it. Like, not enough of them exist in the world, for one. And for two, like, it literally, we're going to have the same conversation in 3 months when set 3 comes out and whatever the next new thing is. Like, it'll just be like, I can't beat this, so I don't like it. Like, well, if you want to play competitive, like if your goal is to be good at competitive, you need to learn to play with or against Nova or whatever the best deck is. It doesn't have to be Nova. If you just want to play at your local or at your kitchen table, like you just like tell your friends we're not going to play Nova and you're going to enjoy the game just fine. Like,
Okay, so there's been 5 of these. The largest event had 8. The second largest event had 10. League 3, 4, 5 had 3. Like, okay, I mean, like these are
what is
small
this?
events. Voyeur League. Let me send you the. You'll have to search because, like Joel said, it won't save the
No,
link.
just give me the TLDR. I don't know what we're looking at these for.
Well, these are silver events, and apparently, what the online, like what the basis of the conversation online was that the top placings were all Novas, like
Okay.
like all of them. So
Okay.
Brian Jurch won this one.
Yeah, I know he has that crazy Nova deck from eBay, right? That's the
Oh, was he the one that bought that?
yeah,
He's got
I
the
think so.
Elementalist ritual with the Sunder. Then he's got Sorcerer. He's only got the
Ben
Sorcerer really to trigger it.
Ben is saying 3, 4, 5 of these leagues haven't happened yet.
Oh,
So
okay,
that might be
okay,
why there's
maybe
nobody
that.
signed
Okay, that
up.
makes sense. Makes sense. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the dates. I was just looking at the events. So,
But like who cares? Like
well,
that
right,
Nova's the best thing. That's like so we have a bunch of recent events that have Nova at the top, right?
right.
Like we knew that already because of the League of Champions thing.
Correct. Yeah. I mean,
Like
League of Champions
this
top
is
four
not
was
surprising to
Nova.
me.
No,
Like when
no.
we talked about this, like when we were previewing set two, I was just all over how crazy Soulbinds were, especially Nova, right?
Yeah.
And we all knew it. It wasn't like some like Philly won the Forge Fest sealed
So
with Dark Heart Nova.
the argument was that the World Championships, there's 15 players currently registered for World Champions. The World Championship, the argument was it's just going to be a bunch of Nova mirrors. That may be true. That may be true. That doesn't actually reinforce that Nova is the best thing in Solforge. It's just the best thing in Solforge right now. Right? It'll
Right.
be.
I mean, if you're preparing for this tournament, like if you're preparing for any tournament that is a big tournament that you care about, you should know what the best deck is,
Yep.
and you should either be playing it or know how to play against it.
Correct. That's what I was going.
That's
That's where I
just
was going.
uh
Yep, Billy, we got that figured out. Thank you. I appreciate both Ankh and Billy bringing that up. But my point with this is you need to test your best decks against Nova decks. And if your best decks can't beat Nova decks, then you need to start figuring out what kind of decks can beat Nova decks. If you think that that's what the field is going to be primarily made up of. And you make a meta call. And if you show up at World Championships and there's no Novas and your deck was tuned and tailor-made to beat Nova, then you should expect a poor result. Because that's...
I mean, that's what happened to at Indy,
right.
At UC Indy, you know, Jurch came playing a deck assuming that everyone was going to be playing Nova.
Right.
And then just got absolutely just sneeze mashed,
right?
Because he didn't play against any Novas,
right? I mean,
that's probably not going to happen here.
No,
like,
I agree.
We've settled it enough that like these people will have Novas in this meta,
right? But, I 100% agree that at this point, Nova is here. It's gonna stay, and it's gonna be the new boogeyman. And I don't think that's a problem. Like, I know lots of people.
Right. I don't care about what the world's meta looks like. I don't know why people don't like mirror matches. Mirror matches are like a better test of skill than
I agree.
Random matchups.
Well, and the argument on the mirror match side inside of the Fifth Cycle Discord, and again, there's been a ton of information that's flown around in that this week and mostly today. But the thing about mirror matches is the argument they're saying is that it really does boil down to who gets to play their Rumble Spark first. And I'm not sure that's entirely true.
I mean, that's under the assumption that there is a significant period of time in the game between when one player plays and the other player plays.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, if one player high rolls and one player low rolls, well, of course, like that's the way the game's going to go.
Right. And there's going to be games where like one player doesn't draw it, and there's going to be games where like you get it turn one in cycle 1, 2, and 3 that are the super high roll or whatever. Like, but that's not any different than any deck that has like a good card in it to play, right? This just happens to be a great card. But if we're talking about like draws that are in the top 10% or the bottom 10%, like, doesn't matter what your deck is doing.
Correct. I agree with
if you're getting outdrawn by that percentage, like that's gonna win or lose.
That happens in every Solforge game, right?
Right.
It happens in every Solforge game.
And the reason I say that mirror matches are the best test of skill is not to include those kind of draws. It's that if players have similar tools, then there is less like RNG over the course of the match than if we're playing different decks and like, you know, there's just an 80-20 matchup. There's probably not an 80-20 match. That's too differential. But like,
well, that's what some people claim.
Like, yeah, but they're stupid. There's not like, I don't care who you are, and if you take that personally, like, you just don't understand math, because there is like at a competitive level, there is not an 80-20 matchup that exists. I don't think so either.
Yeah.
If you go like if you take Greg's deck from that one Indy and Denver and you go to some kid's house who bought one booster, then yeah, you're in a 90-10 winning matchup, right? Like,
right.
So come at me with the literal, like, of course there is. It's all RNG. Yes, right. So we shake that out by getting to the World Championships with these decks that have to level the silver, have to have great players,
all
have to have large
good
collection levels. Right. Like, if there's a like 65-35, I would be surprised.
Sure. I do think the
But
upper ceiling is probably 60-40. I think that's a
like if
realistic.
that's if that's the kind of thing you care about, like is just I don't think that the competitive level of the game is for you.
Yeah.
Like you should be making a meta call.
Yep.
And in this game, that involves a monetary and time investment, like because you have to open your own packs, which is very expensive, or you have to spend your time searching the like what is essentially the dark web of secondary
I
markets.
was gonna
Like
say the
it's
same
just
thing,
like
dude.
people with Excel sheets,
Yeah.
like
I was gonna say the exact same thing. That's so
find
funny.
uh
Yeah, yeah.
finding the pair that you want to get yourself in the win loss margin that you're comfortable with.
Right.
Like that's part of preparing for a high level event. Like just saying, too many people say like I should be able to play at the top tables with whatever I want to play.
Yes.
Well, then you want to play chess,
Yes.
right? Like you want to play a game where you have a known
You
entry
want a
in the
finite
game.
you want a finite symmetrical game, and we don't have
But
a finite symmetrical game here.
saying that like you don't enjoy playing Nova or whatever, but you feel like you have to play at the top tables, like that's what you have to do to play at the top table, so you do it. It doesn't ruin the game. Like
Yes.
it just is the way the game is. If you
Correct.
choose not to play the game, then you choose not to play the game. Like this isn't like the competitive level of the game is not tailored to you.
Right. Right.
Like it's not meant to make you feel good. It's the game. It's how Stoneblade set it up.
Yep.
Maybe there was a miss in the power level of Nova, which maybe there was, right? We know that LeWinter didn't work the way it was supposed to, but there's lots of games that have lots of overpowered cards in them that were misses, and it's up to Stoneblade Entertainment to deal with that, not a random person.
In my
And now,
experience, like
like 6 days prior to World Champions is not the time to do that.
right, if I was playing in Worlds and I had time, I would definitely be testing the suppressing stabilizing Sonic Burst deck that I bought from Joel. Because I think that is a really good potential answer to what all these decks are doing. It hits everything. And I think that's a real opportunity. But that being said, like that deck is rare. Like it's not easy to find those decks.
Right, but so are the good Novas.
Correct. I agree. It's not.
Like
I don't have a
they're
good
just
Nova.
as rare.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a good
We
Nova.
know that because there were at the first couple tournaments following Nova's release, there were a bunch of people trying to play Nova and not winning.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I don't think that super good Novas are a dime a dozen. I think
There's actually probably more chance that you would have a deck similar to the one you're talking about than a good Nova, because there have just been more time that packs have been opened in for set one.
And Soulbind cards are actually technically rarer on the algorithm, right? Than a rare Sonic Burst. Although Sonic Burst has some weird stipulations on what it can roll in, which is kind of interesting.
You're much more likely to open a Sonic Burst than any particular Soulbind.
Right.
I think you're more likely to open a Soulbind than a Sonic Burst.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, yeah.
But that's any Soulbind, not right.
But I'm saying to get the stabilize, like to have stabilizing, suppressing, and Sonic Burst in one deck is a very difficult role. It's a very difficult role, and
right.
you know, it is what it is.
I mean, do I want to see a bunch of crazy stuff happen at Worlds? Yes. Would it be fun to like commentate on some wacky decks out of nowhere? Sure.
Yeah.
Like people like that stuff. I like that stuff too. Like it's not. I am not Player Robot we talked about at the beginning of the show. But I also want to just like I want the mindset that the only way to change things is bans or erratas to go away.
Yeah, it needs
to never be in any game ever again.
I mean, if you guys
like,
I wish you all could have been with us for the last 2 years.
Absolute last resort.
I really wish you guys could have been with us for the last 2 years, because that was the approach that Ashes took in the competitive play. And it decimated the competitive versions of that game. Like, made the game infinitely worse. And in many cases, the next boogeyman was unstoppable. right? Like it
Okay.
actually it got eventually the boogeyman got to a point where you couldn't touch it because all the tools that could touch it had been taken away. Those were the tools that were keeping it in check in the first place, right? So
Yeah, there are a lot of unforeseen consequences
yes,
of
agreed.
making power level erratas.
Yep.
Um,
And
I
to
don't
be
know.
honest, we just don't even know what set 3 has for Exalt Hate. We know that we have heard through the grapevine and through Stoneblade's
Well,
sources that
that
set
was
3 has Exalt
literally
Hate in
like
it.
one of my talking points about Mads Lewinner not being errated was
Right.
like, and I was wrong. Not about that it not about my points that it would potentially solve Mads
Somebody
Lewinner,
should clip that, by the way.
but I was wrong to say that I was like in 3 months or so we're gonna have another set with interaction in it. Well, that's not true because
We're 5
we
months
know
later.
now that we're many months later, and also we're still months away
Right.
from set 3. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we know. I mean, knowing what we know about board game publishing, we're probably at least 3 months away from that. I mean, I could be surprised, and I hope Stoneblade surprises us, but most likely we are 3 months away from that set at a minimum, and it's potentially longer than that, and that's okay. Like I can live with that, assuming that we have. I mean, there's some exciting things that are going to be coming off of this channel on the back half of Gen Con, right? We're going to have a brand new league qualifier. We're going to have a few more single day qualifiers fire up. And then in November, we're going to have the Invitational, right? So, like, these are all competitive plays. Invitational has been approved by Stoneblade to be a silver event. So we are going to bring you a silver event, even though we're not a Forge Guardian. So
yeah, I hope that's a huge event. Like,
I hope it's enormous. I hope that we have so many people show up for that, and I hope that it's a real heater. You know what I mean? Like that's what I really hope for. Excuse me.
I hope
Sorry.
it's all Novas.
Stirring the pot. Stirring the pot. It's possible. It's possible that set 3's out by then. And maybe it is. Maybe it is. But if set 3 is close to SBI, I'm going to tell you right now. I'm making the call. It's not going to be part of SBI then. It just won't be. If it's a month in front of SBI, then yeah, it'll be part of it. But if it's like a week before SBI, forget it. It's not going to be part of it. I'm not broaching that subject because that just turns into who can open the most product the fastest. And that's not really the point of SBI. So, okay. Neil, I think that's going to wrap up our last live stream before Gen Con.
Don't at me about the bands and erratas thing. Like
everybody should add.
I just don't want to. I just don't want to talk about it anymore again.
Just add him with smiley faces.
I just want people to be like happy and play the game.
See?
And try and succeed at the game that's like printed for them.
Just add him with smile faces. I told you, he just wants to be happy. So smile. Just send him a bunch of DMs with smiley faces today. It'll make his night.
I'm grumpy now. I was having a good time talking about all the other stuff, and now I'm grumpy.
I hear you. Well,
I'm gonna be grumpy for 10 hours on the road when we drive to Gen Con next week.
You will not.
Yeah, I will.
I know.
I'm still gonna be leftover grumpy from now until then.
Fair enough.
Like,
fair enough. See what I have to put up with, y'all. Like this is what I got to deal with for the 10-hour drive now. But yeah, we will be back 2 weeks from tonight. That would be the plan. Joel says he'll be happy once it's nerfed.
Right. With some kind of hopeful release in between of Gen Con type coverage.
Right. Yep. There will be content dropping. I just don't know how quickly it'll drop. It's gonna.
I swear to God, if I don't get an invitation to some kind of terrible midnight podcast from Jerch and Cody,
I'm never listening to him again.
I'm just like they did that for the last Gen Con, right?
I think so.
I'm trying to remember who it was that did like the on the scene interview.
Is this your first?
And I think it was like the beginning of the charge plate. Me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you have no idea. You have no idea what we're about to experience.
I'm afraid that I'm gonna hate it. I'm excited to spend like a week with you or whatever and just hang out and have fun. But like I've been to cons before, and like I'm not a big consumerism guy, so like I don't know how I'm gonna feel about just like walking around like
absolutely
all
wild.
the booths.
It's wild, and like it's like an amusement park. Everything's got lines. It's
See, that sounds awful to me.
yeah,
As soon as
it's
I started having to like virtually queue to stuff by buying tickets on the website prior, like that made me feel
yeah,
bad
yeah,
because
it's
I wanted to go there like and just like see something like, ooh, that's neat. I want to hang out and like interact with this for a while, but
yeah,
I know that's not what it's going to be like because they're just going to be,
no. The best
you
part
know,
about it,
like
the honestly, the best part about it is the people and gathering up, like you said, post con, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, going to dinner with folks, then going back and smashing games at the hotel somewhere. That's the best part of the con.
right. I'm very excited to hang out with you. I'm very excited to see everybody from our community that's going
Yep.
to be there. Um, I'm excited to see
Billy, you better bring it up at Gen Con. Honestly, dude. Like, seriously, bring it up.
I'm gonna get in a fist fight. Like it's
And then I will start a.
I'm gonna walk past. I'm gonna walk past the Stone Blade booth, like on day two as we're setting up for
Yeah.
coverage, and Shadow's gonna be there, like giving a demo to someone, and Billy's gonna lean over the counter and be like, "Hey, how you feel about nerfing Nova?" And then it's just gonna like turn into a bar
Yeah,
brawl.
yeah.
Like it just
And then I will start a temporary Patreon just for bail money for Neil. That's what I'll do. All right, everybody, thank you so much for your time tonight.
yeah.
And obviously, we're excited about the news from Stoneblade. We're excited about the future of
Yes.
Soulforge.
I
And
the last two shows have been a little bit of like controversial stuff, maybe like, but it's meant to be constructive
yeah,
criticism.
yeah,
I feel very attached to the community. Um, I am happy to be a part of it, and I hope that people take away positive stuff from our shows.
yes,
I am I am like you, very happy with the Stoneblade response to our show last
yes,
week. If it was to our, I mean, it feels like it was to our show because people on the Discord were agreeing with us, and then like they did it literally the next day. But even if it was just on a whim or whatever, I appreciate
the candor.
the interaction
Yeah,
channel they added and like the PR statement they made and just like
yep,
the response to it. I think was prompt and good. So uh,
yep. Now I just need him to add a channel on the SB Discord for tournament results, so that we don't have to go dig them up by
yes,
hand.
yes, that would be great
And then they just need
because
Shadow needs to
the
write a
event
script to pull them in.
the event search thing is very good for finding events that are coming up for you to sign up for.
Yes,
It's very bad for trying to find events that have fired and finished for results.
correct.
That is a place that if they have some extra time, it should not be on the priority list. That's way down the priority list from the other stuff we've been talking about recently. But like if they have the time and it's easy enough, that would be a cool thing, even if it's like what you said, just like somebody manually like dragging
Just the event link.
some tournament results into a Discord channel or something.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
you could even put that on the TOs. You could just say like, here's a Discord for tournament results if you want to publish.
Right. Yep. I agree.
Uh,
Manly, thank you. Appreciate you, man. You are always so diligent about hanging out with us for the full 2 hours, and I love that. We will see you all in Gen Con, and for those of you that are not
yep.
Gen Con, we'll see you in 2 weeks back here live for Shuffle Bus. Take care, everybody. Have a fantastic weekend. Go play some Soul Forge. Good night.
Good night, everybody.